Chapter 11. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. In a way, it's nice to know there are Greek gods out there, because when things go wrong, you have somebody to blame. For example, when you're walking away from a bus in a rainstorm that's just been attacked by 3 old ladies and blown up by lightning, most people would think that's just really bad luck. But when you're a half-blood, you understand that the gods are really trying to mess up your day. So there we were, Annabeth and Grover and I, walking through the woods along the New Jersey riverbank. Annabeth kept pulling us along, saying, "Come on, the farther away we get, the better." All our money was back there, I reminded her. Our food and clothes, everything. "Well, maybe if you hadn't decided to jump into the fight, we'd be all right," she snapped. "What did you want me to do, let you get killed?" I asked. "You didn't need to protect me, Percy. I would have been fine."
"Sure, you'd be sliced like sandwich bread," Grover said to Annabeth, "but fine."
"Shut up, goat boy," said Annabeth. We sloshed through the mud among twisted trees that smelled like old laundry. After a few minutes, Annabeth said in a softer voice, "Look, Percy, I appreciate your coming back for us, okay? That was really brave." "We're a team, right?" I said. "It's just that," she continued, "if you died, it would mean the quest was over. And this quest may be my only chance to see the real world." "You haven't left Camp Half-Blood since you were 7, right?" I asked her. "No, only short field trips. My dad..." "The history professor?" "Yeah, it didn't work out for me living with my dad at home." "I mean, Camp Half-Blood is my home." She was rushing her words out now. "At camp you train, and that's all cool and everything, but the real world is where the monsters are. That's where you learn whether you're any good or not." She almost sounded like she wasn't sure about herself. "You're pretty good with that knife," I said. "You think so?" "Anybody who can put a fury in a wrestler's hold is a good fighter," I said. I couldn't really see, but I thought she might have smiled. "You know," she said, "maybe I should tell you, Percy, something funny back on the bus." But she was interrupted when Grover cried, "Smell that!" Through the darkness of the trees, I could see the colors of a neon sign. I could smell fried, greasy, excellent food. I craved a double cheeseburger. We followed the smell through the trees and found an empty road. Across the road was one open shop. It was one of those shops that sell silly statues for your yard, like plastic flamingos and wooden Indians and cement grizzly bears. With my dyslexia, to me the sign looked like "Et nu mis gderen gomen mepruim." "What the heck does that say?" I asked. "I don't know," Annabeth said. She loved reading so much, I'd forgotten she was dyslexic too. Grover translated, "Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium." I crossed the street, following the smell of the hamburgers. "The lights are on inside," Annabeth said. "Maybe it's open." "Are you two crazy?" Grover said. "This place is weird." We ignored him. The front lot was a forest of statues, cement animals, cement children, even a cement satyr playing the pipes, which gave Grover the creeps. "Blah!" he bleated. "That satyr statue looks just like my Uncle Ferdinand." We stopped at the warehouse door. "Don't knock," Grover pleaded. "I smell monsters." Annabeth said, "All I smell is burgers. Aren't you hungry?" "Come on, let's leave," Grover whined. "These statues are looking at me." Then the door creaked open, and standing in front of us was a tall woman who wore a long black gown that covered everything but her hands, and her head was completely veiled. Her eyes glinted behind her black veil, but that was about all I could see. She said, "Children, it is too late to be out all alone. Where are your parents?" "We're lost," I said. "Is that food I smell?" "Oh, my dears," the woman said, "you must come in, poor children. I am Auntie Em. Go straight through to the back of the store, please. There is a dining area." We thanked her and went inside. The warehouse was filled with more statues. I saw statues of people in all different poses, outfits, and expressions on their faces. They were all life-size, but I was mostly thinking about food. Go ahead, call me an idiot for walking into a strange lady's shop just because I was hungry, but I do impulsive things sometimes. Plus, you've never smelled Auntie Em's burgers. I couldn't think of anything else but the food. I barely noticed Grover's nervous whimpers, or the way the statue's eyes seemed to follow me, or the fact that Auntie Em had locked the door behind us. "Please sit down," Auntie Em said. "Thank you, ma'am," Annabeth said. "Quite all right, Annabeth," she said. "You have such beautiful gray eyes, child." Only later did I wonder how she knew Annabeth's name, even though we had never introduced ourselves. The woman disappeared behind the snack counter and started cooking. Before we knew it, she brought us double cheeseburgers, vanilla shakes, and extra-large servings of French fries. I was halfway through my burger before I remembered to breathe. Annabeth slurped her shake. Grover picked at the fries, but he still looked too nervous to eat. "What's that hissing noise?" he asked. "Hissing?" Auntie Em asked. "Perhaps you hear the deep fryer oil. You have keen ears, Grover." Auntie Em ate nothing. She had not taken off her headscarf, even to cook, and now she sat forward and watched us eat. It was a little strange having someone stare at me when I couldn't see her face, but I was feeling satisfied after the burger and a little sleepy. "You make these statues yourself?" I asked, just to be nice. "Oh, yes. Once upon a time I had 2 sisters to help me in the business, but they have passed away, and Auntie Em is alone. I have only my statues. They are my company." The sadness in her voice sounded so real that I couldn't help feeling sorry for her. My neck tingled, as if somebody else was looking at me. I turned, but it was just a statue of a young girl holding an Easter basket. But something was wrong with her face. It looked as if she were startled or even terrified. "Ah," Auntie Em said sadly, "you notice some of my statues do not turn out well. The face is the hardest to get right, always the face." Annabeth had stopped eating. She sat forward and said, "You had 2 sisters?" "It's a terrible story," Auntie Em said. "You see, Annabeth, a bad woman was jealous of me, long ago when I was young. I had a boyfriend, you know, and this bad woman was determined to break us apart. She caused a terrible accident. My sisters stayed by me. They shared my bad luck as long as they could, but eventually they faded away. I alone have survived, but at a price." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I felt bad for her. My full stomach was making me sleepier. Poor old lady. Who would want to hurt somebody so nice? "Percy?" Annabeth was shaking me to get my attention. "Maybe we should go." She sounded tense. I wasn't sure why. "Such beautiful gray eyes," Auntie Em told Annabeth again. "Yes, it has been a long time since I've seen gray eyes like those." She reached out as if to touch Annabeth's cheek, but Annabeth stood up abruptly. "We really should go." "Yes," Grover swallowed his waxed paper and stood up. Our family is waiting, right." I didn't want to leave. I felt full and content. Auntie Em was so nice. I wanted to stay with her a while. "Please, dears," Auntie Em pleaded, "before you go, won't you at least sit for a photo?" Annabeth turned to go. "I don't think we can, ma'am. Come on, Percy." "Sure we can," I said. I was irritated with Annabeth for being so bossy, so rude to an old lady who'd just fed us for free. "It's just a photo, Annabeth. What's the harm?"
"Yes, Annabeth," the woman purred. "No harm."
I could tell Annabeth didn't like it, but she allowed Auntie Em to lead us back out the front door into the garden of statues. Auntie Em directed us to a park bench next to the stone satyr.
"Now," she said, "the young girl in the middle, I think, and the two young gentlemen on either side."
"Where's your camera?" Grover asked. Auntie Em stepped back, as if to admire the shot.
"Now, can you smile for me, please, everyone? A large smile."
Grover glanced at the cement satyr next to him and mumbled, "That sure does look like Uncle Ferdinand."
"Grover," Auntie Em said, "look this way, dear."
She still had no camera in her hands. "Percy," Annabeth said. Some instinct warned me to listen to Annabeth, but I was fighting the sleepy feeling that came from the food and the old lady's voice.
"I will just be a moment," Auntie Em said. "You know, I can't see you very well in wearing this veil over my face."
"Percy, something's wrong," Annabeth insisted.
"Wrong?"
Auntie Em said, reaching up to take off the scarf around her head.
"Nothing's wrong, dear."
"That is Uncle Ferdinand," Grover gasped. "Look away from her!" Annabeth shouted. She whipped her Yankees cap onto her head and vanished. Her invisible hands pushed Grover and me both off the bench. I was on the ground, looking at Aunt Em's feet. I could hear Grover crawling off in one direction, Annabeth in another, but I was too dazed to move. Then I heard a strange rasping sound above me. My eyes rose to Auntie Em's hands, which had grown sharp talons for fingernails. I almost looked higher, but somewhere off to my left, Annabeth screamed, "No! Don't look, Percy!" More rasping. The sound of tiny snakes right above me, from about where Auntie Em's head would be. "Run!" Grover bleated. I heard him yelling, "Maya!" to start his flying sneakers. I couldn't move. I stared at Auntie Em's claws and tried to fight the feeling of sleepiness Auntie Em had put on me.
"I would not want to destroy a handsome young face," she told me soothingly. "Stay with me, Percy. All you have to do is look up."
I fought the urge to obey. Instead, I looked to one side and saw one of those glass balls people put in gardens. I could see Auntie Em's dark reflection in the glass. Her headscarf was gone, revealing her face as a shimmering pale circle. Her hair was moving like snakes. Auntie Em! Auntie Em! How could I have been so stupid? She was Medusa. Think, I told myself. How did Medusa die in the myth? I remembered that in the myth, Medusa had been asleep when she was attacked by the character named Perseus, but she wasn't asleep now. If she wanted, she could take those talons right now and claw my face open.
The gray-eyed one did this to me, Percy," Medusa said, and her voice sounded like a poor old grandmother. "Annabeth's mother, the cursed Athena, turned me from a beautiful woman into this."
"Don't listen to her!" Annabeth's voice shouted. "Run, Percy!" "Silence!" Medusa snarled. Then her voice went back to a comforting purr.
"You see why I must destroy the girl, Percy. She is my enemy's daughter. I shall crush her statue to dust. But you, dear Percy, you don't need to suffer."
"No," I muttered. I tried to make my legs move.
"Do you really want to help the gods?" Medusa asked. "Do you understand what waits for you on this foolish quest, Percy? What do you think will happen if you reach the underworld? Do not be a pawn of the Olympian gods, my dear. Do not trust them, and do not do whatever they say. You would be better off as a statue. Less pain, less pain. Percy! Behind me, I heard a buzzing sound. Grover yelled, "Duck!" I turned, and there Grover was in the night sky, flying in with his winged shoes fluttering, holding a tree branch the size of a baseball bat. His eyes were shut tight. He was navigating by ears and nose alone. "Duck!" he yelled again. "I'll get her!" That finally jolted me into action. Knowing Grover, I was sure he'd miss Medusa and nail me. I dove to one side. Thwack went Grover's tree branch. "That was for Uncle Ferdinand!" Grover yelled. "You miserable satyr!" Medusa snarled at Grover. "I'll add you to my collection." Annabeth took off her Yankees cap and became visible. "Percy, you have to cut her head off." "What? Are you crazy? Let's get out of here." "Medusa is a danger. She's evil. I'd kill her myself, but—" Annabeth swallowed as if she didn't want to say it. "But you've got the better weapon. Besides, I never get close to her. She'd slice me to bits because of my mother. You've got a chance." "What? I can't fight that thing." "You have to. Do you want her turning more innocent people into statues?" Annabeth tossed me the glass ball. "Just look at her reflection in the glass. Never look at her face directly." I took out my pen and uncapped it. The bronze blade of my sword, riptide, grew in my hand. I followed the hissing and spitting sounds of Medusa's hair. I kept my eyes locked on the gazing ball, so I would only glimpse Medusa's reflection, not the real thing. Then, in the glass, I saw her. Grover was coming in for another hit at Medusa, but this time he flew a little too low. Medusa grabbed the stick and pulled him onto the ground. He tumbled through the air and crashed into a statue with a painful oomph. Medusa was about to lunge at him when I yelled, "Hey!" I walked toward her, holding my sword and the glass ball. If she charged, I'd have a hard time defending myself. But she let me approach. 20 feet, 10 feet. I could see the reflection of her face now. Her eyes seemed to burn right into me, making me feel weak. "You wouldn't harm an old woman, Percy," she crooned. "I know you wouldn't." From the ground, Grover moaned, "Percy, don't listen to her." Medusa cackled. "Too late." She lunged at me with her talons. I slashed up with my sword, heard a sickening schlock, then a hiss, like wind rushing out, the sound of a monster falling apart. Something fell to the ground next to my foot. It took all my willpower not to look. I could feel warm ooze soaking into my sock, little dying snake heads tugging at my shoelaces. "Oh, yuck," Grover said. His eyes were still tightly closed, but I guess he could hear the thing gurgling and steaming. "Mega yuck." Annabeth came up next to me, her eyes fixed on the sky. She was holding Medusa's black veil. She said, "Don't move." Very, very carefully, without looking down, she knelt and covered the monster's head in black cloth, then picked it up. It was still dripping green juice. "Are you okay?" she asked me, her voice trembling. "Yeah," I decided, though I felt like throwing up my double cheeseburger. Why didn't the head disappear?" "Once you cut it off, it becomes a trophy of war," she said. "Same as your minotaur horn. But don't unwrap the head. It can still petrify you." Grover moaned as he got off the ground. He had a big bump on his forehead. The magic sneakers were flying around his head. "Good job, man," I said. He managed a bashful grin. "That really was not fun, though. Well, the hitting her with a stick part, that was fun. But crashing into a statue, not fun." "Yeah," Annabeth said. "Well, at least we're not turned into stone. At least we were smart enough not to look at her." Grover snatched his shoes out of the air.
I recapped my sword. We found some old plastic grocery bags in the shop and double-wrapped Medusa's head. We plopped it on the table where we'd eaten dinner and sat, too exhausted to speak. Finally, I said to Annabeth, "So we have your mother Athena to thank for this monster." Annabeth flashed me an irritated look. "It's your dad's fault, actually. Don't you remember? Medusa was once a beautiful woman, and she was Poseidon's girlfriend. They decided to meet in my mother's temple. Medusa's sisters helped her get into the temple. That's why Athena turned her into a monster. All 3 sisters became the 3 Gorgons." "That's why Medusa wanted to slice you up," I realized. "Right," said Annabeth, "but she wanted to preserve you as a nice statue. She's still sweet on your dad. You probably reminded her of him." My face was burning. "Oh, so now it's my fault we met Medusa." Annabeth said, "Of course it is." She copied my voice, saying, "It's just a photo, Annabeth. What's the harm?" "Shut up," I said. "You're impossible." "You're insufferable. You're—" "Hey," Grover interrupted. "You two are giving me a headache. What are we going to do with Medusa's head?" I stared at the thing. I was angry, not just with Annabeth or her mom, but with all the gods for this whole quest, for getting us blown off the road and in 2 major fights the very first day out from camp. At this rate, we'd never make it to Los Angeles alive, especially not before the summer solstice. What had Medusa said? "Do not be a pawn of the Olympians, my dear. Do not trust them and do not do whatever they say. You would be better off as a statue." I had an idea. I searched the back of the warehouse until I found Medusa's office with her money and business papers. I found the Underworld's address was DOA Recording Studios, West Hollywood, California. I folded up the bill and stuffed it in my pocket. In the cash register, I found $20, a few golden drachmas, and some boxes for the Hermes Mail Express. I took one that was about the size of Medusa's head. "I'm going to give the gods a surprise," I said. I went back to the picnic table, packed up Medusa's head, and wrote an address. The Gods, Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York, New York. With best wishes, Percy Jackson. "The gods are not going to like that you are sending them Medusa's head," Grover warned. "They'll think you're impertinent." I poured some golden drachmas in the box. As soon as I closed it, the package floated off the table and disappeared with a pop. "I am impertinent," I said. I looked at Annabeth, daring her to scold me. She didn't. She seemed to accept the fact that I had a major talent for making the gods angry. "Come on," she muttered. "We need a new plan."